It's not my problem. When I feel heavy metal, and I'm pissed and I'm beat. When I lie and I'm missing all of the time, when I'm never sure why I need you. Please let me shout.
He has his own training facility where he is training offensive linemen, trying to help them improve, get the most out of them. So we're really excited to talk to him. So, but before we do that, I'm Coach Human. I have in the middle there Coach D, and obviously we have Coach Mike Pollock to talk more about offensive line play. Mike, it's great to have you on.
Hey, appreciate you having me.
No, it's exciting. It's obviously everything starts with the offensive line. Nothing happens there offensively unless those guys can do the job. Doesn't matter how fast or athletic your skill guys are. There's no blocking up front, you're in a whole lot of trouble. Coach, talk about. I touched on your background. Maybe if you could talk a little bit about from high school all the way up to the pros and to now, what you're doing with your training.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was one of those guys you hear, whether it's a legacy player, his dad played or family member played. I didn't want to play football. Like I was a baseball kid. I grew up in Arizona, so baseball is a year-round sport here. So, but my genetics kind of just started to take over and had coaches go, "Hey, you'd be good at football." And I was like, I'm gonna go play in the major leagues. I don't know what you're talking about. And I tried it my freshman year and kind of fell in love with the physical nature of the sport and didn't want to be a lineman. I wanted to be a tight end. I could catch the ball. And again, my size said otherwise. And it took me a couple of seasons to truly appreciate the skill and the craft of being a lineman and having that protector mindset. So from an early age, it was, kind of learning the base foundation of what it meant to be an O lineman and getting to stay in state, play center at Arizona State, and had a lot of success there. And kind of realized I got to play early due to some injuries and realized that the guys I was playing for ended up in the league and had people starting to chirp in my ear and go, man, you might have a even higher path than the guys that you're playing next to and for. But it was one of those things where, you know, being an undersized lineman and in the era of not current college football, but hey, come red shirt, we're going to develop you and really immerse myself in that work ethic and having a bunch of people along the way fuel me by saying you're not big enough, you're not good enough, you're not going to make it to the next level, and being able to ride that chip on my shoulder to the NFL and have a pretty lengthy career and have kind of enjoyed those playing days. But having played so much football, I got to the end of my career and was one of those former pros that didn't want their own kids playing football. And I hate admitting that because, football changed my life forever. It's instilled things in me that I wouldn't be who I am today without playing football. But my wife, who's physical therapist, kind of saw the physical toll that it took on my body. And we kind of came to this agreement that our boys weren't going to play football. And then I got reconnected with my business partner, who's now the O-line coach for the Cincinnati Bengals, Scott Peters, who had started this training program as his next kind of career after his NFL career. And I was kind of intrigued by it because, yeah, you know, whether it was high school, college, or pro football, you always have this player safety component and people talking to you of how do we make the game safer. But at that time, it felt like all of these, whether it was whatever resource it was trying to make football safer, it felt like it was making the game softer. And that's where Coach Peters kind of came in and said, you know what, we're going to keep this aggressive nature of football. And he had kind of devised the nuts and bolts of our program that said, you know, if we can create a more competent player who's more confident in his contact skills, he's going to be a safer player. So everywhere we went, we started to see that we were making better football players and they were having they were having less concussions, less head neck injuries. So we were making the game of football safer without sacrificing the aggressive nature of the sport that we all love. And that has kind of just continued to where we're at today, working with high school and youth is our biggest demographic. But I mean, I get hired by college programs and NFL players will come out and work with me in the offseason getting ready. And obviously, Coach Peters has had a lot of success with the linemen he's gotten to work with over the years.
What specifically are you guys doing from that standpoint to really help the linemen get that confidence?
I can't hear you, Coach.
Can't hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me, Dave?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
You can't hear me?
Oh, that's interesting.
That's interesting. He can't hear me, but I can hear him. That's weird. And I'm not on mute.
Wow,
Derek.
that's a first. That's a first, Mike. No, that's a first. We've never had that one. We've had almost everything under the sun, but we've never had that one. No, we've never had that one.
So, you can't hear me, Coach?
Yeah, I can't. I got nothing.
No, I can't, but I can hear you.
Yeah,
that's
wild.
That's a new one.
It's not. He's not muted.
Nope.
I'm gonna try something here. Hold on.
Can you hear me now better?
No.
No.
I can hear you. So it's the same.
All right. Well, what? I don't even.
Hang on,
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. I just can't hear Coach Schumann.
Wow.
So.
I don't know if that's.
I don't know. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Now I got you. Now I can
That's
hear you.
so weird. That was so
strange.
Can you hear me? Derek, can you hear me now? I don't know if Derek can hear me now.
Derek, can you hear him?
I can hear you. He might go in and out. He might be going out and then coming back in. Sometimes the connection messes around. This is one of those things. The technology, for as good as it is, it's always a pain in the ass at the same time.
Well, what I was going to ask was, so I was saying, how did you guys design the program to really develop the athletes from that standpoint?
You can still hear me, right?
Yeah. So, Coach Peters, at the tail end of his NFL career, he played 7 years as well. He got into like jujitsu as a way to stay competitive and in shape in the off season. And he was quickly humbled and frustrated by the sport because being a big offensive lineman, strong, he gets in this realm where he's fit up with guys half of his size and twice his age, and he's getting thrown around and manipulated into postures that he just can't be bigger, stronger, and faster. Like the model that we've used in the football world forever wasn't working in this martial art. And so it really bugged him, and he dedicated a lot of time to study the postures of leverage and how they were creating strength when they weren't as physically strong as measured by the metrics that we use in football. And so he realized, like, wow, there's a lot of these postures and ways to tweak the aspects that we were taught on the line of scrimmage, just contact in general, and apply them to football to yield a better result than what we were doing. And so he went and tested this basic program at the University of Washington back in like 2013, and just specifically working with their O-line and D linemen. And he was there for a couple of weeks working with their coaches and players. And then the Huskies that year went on to set school records and rushing yards, points. So they were number 2 in the nation in sacks. And they credited a lot of the physicality to the techniques that they were learning. And then at the end of the season, he got a call from the athletic staff that said there were no concussions on those position groups, which, having played at those higher levels, that's pretty unique. And so that's where he kind of realized, you
Yeah.
know, if I can use like these martial arts principles and apply them to the objectives we need in football, well, I can create stronger linemen. And a lot of what we talk about is postures of strength, and a lot of it is very different to how we were taught at the various levels coming through the game.
And you know, as far as how you develop that confidence and that physicality at the same time that you keep them safe, like, is there a progression that you go through with the athletes? Like, where does it start? Like, what are
Yeah,
the levels?
yeah, absolutely. And so like a lot of how we train is parallel to the way martial artists train. And I was never really big into UFC or that realm until getting connected with Coach Peters. And when you really see, like, there's obviously differences. You have individual sport versus a team sport. So your practice time or development time is going to be a little bit differently. But how they approach getting ready for a big fight is they use this part whole mentality, where they're working at specifics of their grappling or striking or submission, and then they'll go in the realm of the ring and test it and refine it with a partner. Whereas football, our individual time is very limited in comparison to the amount of team periods we would have in practice. Obviously, the team sport is going to have that, but the things that we are practicing on the individual scale weren't as detailed or methodical as a martial artist would do. So our training protocols are very progressive, similar to a mastery belt level that, you know, martial artists go through. It's like you got to master this skill before advancing to the next piece. And so for us, it's we start with postures of strength. It's everybody's connected to the ground. How do we maximize our lower body, the postures we need to store energy, to create energy? How are we applying force? Is it through our hands? Is it through our shoulders? Is it through one hand, two hands? Are we working with a partner? And then obviously it's football, it's a competition. There's going to be some times where you get beat. Are you training counters to the results that you get, right? Everybody can drop plan A and goes, we want to block it like this. We see it in the meeting room on the whiteboard. But there's going to be times where
Yeah.
the play breaks down on the field, or your plan A breaks down, and the player who has trained plan B, C, and D is going to be more consistent over time, rather than just a lot of the coaching adage we would give is drive your feet or hit them harder, or you got to want it harder. And it wasn't very specific to the tools needed to the job. We equate it to, you know, if you're going to chop down a tree, you're going to spend time really refining that axe and getting it as sharp as possible to make that as your job as optimal as possible, versus just swinging a dull axe harder and more times. So it's really that front end methodology that's different.
The technique aspect of it, and understanding how their muscles work and everything like that. Is it, do you, with offensive linemen, do you guys really specifically try to get them to be well-rounded athletically? Do you have them more focused on their own position work? What do you do there?
Yeah, I mean, it's always based on the level of athlete we're working with, right? If we're working with a youth player or a high school player, it's still like foundational, like everything you
Right.
can whittle down to your feet, your hips, and your hands. The higher level players we work with, you know, those NFL linemen, those defensive rushers are just some phenomenal athletes today. And so
Freaks.
we'll probably spend more time in the pass pro realm with those guys. um, but you know, the majority of players are going to be in that high school to youth range, and it's focusing on how do we stay connected to the ground with our hips under our body, and we're not leaning on people. You know, I had a lot of coaches who would say, use your hips, use your hips, use your hips. But they would be teaching me like a push, a press, you know, push it. Most sleds operate on a horizontal plane, but your hip, like you think about a hang clean or a squat, the uncoiled mechanic of your hips and a pressing motion of your hands, like a bench press, those are opposite mechanics of the body. And so you're telling kids to use one and the same, and another component, but not teaching the why they work differently. How do we utilize them together so we can maximally put force and effort, our power, through our opponent based on whatever the player objective demand is?
Yeah, I mean that's a big part of the offensive line. Where guys have always originally were saying like bring your hips all the way through, finish them. But when you do that, right, you start to get out of position, you may lose leverage, right?
Yep.
And as opposed to staying with your feet in the ground and being able to move accordingly. Um, is the offensive line play? It's so interesting because obviously the youth level running and high school running is running the ball is most important. And college is probably mixed, and then the pro, obviously, passing game's a little more important than the run game, and then of course, obviously, the people they're playing against differ as they go up to different levels, right? So speed becomes more and more of a premium on the defensive line as you move up the levels, right? And these guys are flying. One of the things I noticed in like the last few years, probably since maybe you stopped playing, but last 5 to 10 years. But what I noticed is that the defensive, especially well inside and outside, but outside especially, they're so fast. Like it's irrelevant to how tall. Sometimes they're tall, sometimes they're not that tall, but they're super fast. And the offensive tackle, and whether it's left or right, because sometimes there's lefties now at quarterback, which there was a time where there really were not that many of them. That tackle position is where guys were like when they were drafting them, I would say in the 2000s, and when you played, you could kind of pretty much rely that if you drafted a left tackle or a right tackle for the lefty guy, that he was going to be pretty good if you drafted him high. And now it's become a little more of a crapshoot because of the speed of the ends. Because a guy could be dominant in college, play at a big school, be dominant because physically he's more dominant, and the guys rushing are not quite as fast. But at the NFL, all these guys are, right, and they're all fast, and maybe even faster than ever, right? They're almost like running backs that are lining up like tall running backs. You know what I mean? Like if Adrian Peterson bulked up 25 pounds and was a defensive end, that's who you have half the time rushing off the edge. Guys that were like 10 400-meter dash guys that got big, and that's changed a lot because you see guys drafting guys in the first round or second round. Those used to be slam dunks, and they're not. What are some of the things? Because that's difficult as you go up the ladder for the offensive linemen as they continue to progress. How does an offensive lineman continue to transition their skills accordingly over time? Because in one aspect, right, each phase they're required to kind of be a little bit different as they go up the ladder.
Yeah, there's a couple components to that. I think the biggest factor that, the current college game has really created a lot of problems through, whether it's the transfer portal, NIL, lack of development time. Like the NCAA puts all these rules on, like in the off season, like there's so much time you can be with your position coach, and instead the position coaches end up, basically trying to imprint assistant strength coaches with all this, O-line knowledge to go work with their players because they can work with a strength coach, but not a O-line coach. So development is not necessarily prioritized like it could be or should be. And then with the amount of kids that are bouncing from one school to another, and they're getting a lot of different coaching philosophies. And so a kid, and this is, I really think, like, if I'm an offensive lineman coming out today, it's like I'm putting a lot of weight not in the NIL, not in the logo or the colors. It's like, who is that coach? What is he going to teach me? What is his pedigree of, what's his line of work of helping guys get to that next level? Because if I'm playing for a coach who's prioritizing development, I might have a shot at that next level. And the thing at the highest level is the NFL. Those 32 teams, they all value different things when it comes to linemen. And
Right.
there used to be, like my last year in Indianapolis was the year Peyton was hurt, and we went through a bunch of different quarterbacks, and then they fired everybody. They brought in Pagano. They brought in a new GM who wanted 6'5", 335 linemen across the board. Well, they ran Andrew Luck out of the league because they went through the most starting lineups of offensive line play in the history of the game in 5 years. So it's not just big farm strong guys.
Right.
They got to be able to move. And so it's a combination of having fast feet. There is a level of strength that is required at that level. There's some coaches who prioritize arm length. Sometimes detrimental. You can find a guy that can tie a shoe standing up, but sometimes that's a hindrance. You can't play a line. Like I've played with guys. I've had guys in the O-line room that would dominate in a world's strongest man competition, but could not move their feet to save their life.
Can't move a buddy. Yep.
Yeah, and so there are so many variables that people get caught up in. I've seen guys get drafted solely based on the school they went to. They're like,
Right.
oh, well, he played in the FCC, so I'm going to take him over this guy who played in the Big Ten or an ACC school, but that guy's got measurables or he's more athletic. I can see him. The college level, they take kids based off of recruiting rank versus a coach going, that's a kid I see that I trust my coaching ability, his intangibles, I'm going to make him a good player. And so there is a lost art there. And so when I talk to pro guys, when Coach Peters first got in the league, he was with the Browns assistant coach under Bill Callahan. And, you go to a place like
the best
Cleveland,
ever, right?
Exactly. You go to a place like Cleveland, who they're used to this revolving door of coaches. So from the veterans perspective, it's like, okay, this guy's going to be here a year, maybe two. What am I going to, I got to do what I have to do to keep my job. And the desire to learn and improve isn't the same for a lot of places because the situations they're in. Whereas I was I went to Indianapolis and I'm playing next to guys like Jeff Saturday and Ryan Dean, guys who are established veterans who I could learn a lot from. And sometimes you get into a place and it's like the veterans don't want to talk to the rookies because they don't want people going after their jobs. And,
right.
Yeah. And then so after like year 2 in Cleveland, you're seeing guys like Joe Bitonio and like perennial Pro Bowlers start to go, wow, this is pretty cool. I remember in 2017, Scott and I got hired by the Cowboys to go to training camp, which I don't even know how you call it training camp when you're in Oxnard, California. It's like the most beautiful weather to have NFL training camp. But we're in a room with like Tyron Smith, Travis Frederick, Zach Martin, guys who are like way better pros than we've ever been. Guys some of those guys are going to be Hall of Famers.
Yep.
And they're looking at the things we're teaching them going, holy smokes, like I want this. I've been to college rooms and college coaches like, oh, this is basically what I teach. And then the coach leaves and I'm talking to the players and they're like, we've never heard any of this before. So it's cool.
There's
but
such
it's
a disconnect.
It's crazy.
It's disappointing too, because you get these big time programs that are paying a lot of money for your coaching. And you think the higher up you go, the coaching is going to be better at every level, but it's not necessarily true. Some of the best technical coaches I've been around are at the high school level.
Right.
And it's a position group that doesn't get the credit it deserves, because you think about, the highest paid guy in your team is probably your quarterback, and he gets hurt. I've been on a season when the quarterback gets hurt and you're stuck with backups and trying to fill that position with stop gaps, and it's not. But then there's teams that go, hey, we're not going to pay the guys up front because I trust my coach to develop a kid. And so there's this balancing act that a lot of coaches or a lot of management will template offensive lineman. I want my tackles to be X high, his height at X and his weight at Y. And college coaches get into these template where it's like this matrix. A kid who's 6'2" may not get a Power 5 offer because he's 6'2", and then goes to like a MAC school and just dominates. I'm like, I played next to Jeff Saturday, who was maybe 6'2", standing on his tippy toes, and he was a perennial Pro Bowler, like one of the best ever. So it's like the coaches who are willing to and trust their development plans can take a kid and go, this guy's tough. Like his effort is off the charts. He's a leader of our team, and now he just needs information. And so coaches get into these cycles where they sometimes get way too much focused on scheme and go, hey, here's a new play we can put in. And so practice time is taken up by, hey, here's a new play or a gadget, or we got to be ready for these 30 blitzes that we might only see 3 in the game. And we're not focusing our time on optimizing the player and giving him the tools to counter the in-game planning stuff that takes place. It's like, you're not going to get to halftime and go, hey, here, let's throw in this new play that we haven't worked all week. It's like, hey, who are you going against? What is he good at? How can he beat you? And go, okay, this is what I need to focus on so I can do my job as effectively and as optimally as possible week to week to week.
It's a great point. What is it's interesting because that really kind of bolts into what I was thinking as far as like the development of the line really gets severely affected at the college level because of the transferring. And unless you get, like you said, know where you're going, and you happen to have a guy that stays too, right? It's not just having a great guy, but is also, does he stay, right?
Yeah.
And then they constantly have turnaround. I do think that the offensive line becomes a group, and I've seen it even back when I was playing. And I played linebacker in college, but I remember like one year you'd have a guy that was an offensive line, really was an offensive line guy, and then the next year you had a guy that they made do the offensive line. You know what I mean? And that probably happens a lot, I would guess, in college. And the other thing that I think probably happens in college, and I don't know if this happens in the NFL, but definitely in college, is that the guys are really like looking to jump to the next thing. So they're there, and if you haven't already have a good line, they may not be an expert themselves, but they're almost like managers of the offensive line. Like, don't screw them up. Don't, you know what I mean? And they don't develop from that standpoint, meaning like, hey, we have a group of guys that are really good. I know this guy's not going to screw it up. Like, so it's almost like a management level, like you're managing the crew and making sure versus trying to get them to the level they need to. And I think that has kind of trickled up to the NFL. You're starting to see this where guys who, physically look like they should be able to do it, struggle doing it. And a lot of it's technique. Like the tackles are leaning all the time when they're trying to, Michael Parsons probably very difficult for them because he's so fast and he's short technically, so he's not a long defensive end who's matching them in height. He's a short guy who's coming underneath them and outrunning them, and so in some cases just flat out outrunning them to the spot. And then if they get you to over kick or come out too hard, then he just slides underneath you, right? And he sometimes not even really touching them. That's the amazing thing. Like, he's not like, there's a lot of times like he's basically getting a hand on the offense. He's barely touching them and going by them. And I think that's the part it's so interesting. I think when you talk about the height part, the height aspect of it all, there has been such an emphasis on that. But like, when you think about it, like if you look at basketball, if a guy's 7 feet tall, he probably doesn't move as well as the 6'6" guy in basketball, right? So it's not that they can't. There's exceptions like Wembanyama, right, who's 7'6" and somehow can move pretty well and all those kind of things. But the average run-of-the-mill 7-foot NBA player has a certain limited movement skill set. They rely on the fact that they're tall. Well, if that's the philosophy on as your NFL tackles, for example, then you have a situation where there's very few Wembanyama's out there, almost none, maybe one. And you would be better off with, like, instead of, the equivalent would be, okay, you'd be better off with the 6'9", 6'10" guy, which would be like the 6'3" guy, maybe 6'4" guy as an offensive lineman that could really move, that could move a lot better, could combat a running back style defensive end who's just really a freak athlete with freak speed. And that's the only way to combat him. And because of that, they're also going to be the thing that Micah Parsons I always think is really weak at is the run game. So when you run at him, he's going to have a problem. That's another area that an overly tall tackle will not be able to dominate. So it becomes now Micah Parsons, and I use him as an example because everyone's like, wow, and obviously the defensive end from the Browns, who just signed a huge contract, is tall and fast. Myles Garrett, right? He's tall and fast, but he's a different guy. Like they could kind of visualize what that guy can do, but now you get a tall guy that's trying to run block a shorter, squatty, quick guy, and he's not getting into him. He might be getting into them, on the run game, right? So it's really, really interesting because I think a lot of the general managers in the NFL, and I was an NFL agent for 6 years, and having dealt with quite a few, actually the guys that are now general managers, a lot of them, and you know how this is in the NFL, like they kind of, those guys were like, I would say mid-level personnel guys when I was an agent. I stopped doing them in 2021. And now they're GMs, a lot of them. And I think that they're like, they don't really know how to handle the kind of that type of player at the offensive line. And you have the so when you're moving back inside, like Zach Martin, or, some teams may require an enormous guard. Some teams may require a more athletic guard, depending on what your kind of a scheme is, even though at the NFL, a lot of people run certain things. But there's different types of players that you got to combat because Aaron Donald happens to be a unique character, right? So it becomes a lot more of the personnel matchups and the development of that guys and his specific skill sets. That's why I always found interesting too, because you keep 8 offensive linemen usually in that range in the NFL. That's really difficult because 2 of them are jack of all trades kind of guys.
Yep.
And they kind of have to go in any spot, and the other guys are more specialized that are the starters. What do you see as like ways to continue to combat that on the development side? If there is a way, because it's so that's the one thing that to me is so interesting, how like they think they solved it and then they didn't solve it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, with how analytical NFL and all sports in general are getting, there's certain like metrics that they put a lot of value into. But one thing that was quite surprising that we kind of discovered a number of years ago was like back when the Pro Bowl was actually like an actual game and not all this nonsense they do now. You could look at like the average height and weight of every position in the NFL, and you look at the Pro Bowl team, and it was always a little bit shorter and a little bit lighter than the league average. And it was fascinating because it was kind of goes to your point is, there's some people who just want these massive earth movers. And, Bill Callahan used to say that there's a certain height number where he wouldn't want to draft a kid because at some point the hips are too far off the ground, and it's going to be really hard to get your hips, because like the old low man wins adage, it's not like your pad level, it's can you get the height of your hips under your opponent's hips. That more often than not is going to be the deciding factor of who's getting pushed back and who's not. But a lot of it is the information that's given in those meeting rooms. The coaches who go, this is our system. This is how we teach pass protection. We always set on this angle. We're going to use 2 hands all the time. Well, it doesn't take long, but for those other guys on the other side of the ball to realize they have a whole toolbox of pass rushes. And so rather than going, well, my pass set on this protection, I'm going to go kick, punch. Well, why can't we have more information on our end so we can kind of create and formulate our own system on our side to combat an Aaron Donald or a Micah Parsons or a Bosa, like guys who have unique
talents,
skill sets. Like I played with Dwight Freeney for 4 years, and get like one of
I was going to ask that. Because he was ahead of his time. He would, if he played now, he would be even more so on a different level. I think he was one of those transitional guys, right? That kind of took that position to a different, limelight, right? Especially with you've seen the evolution of defenses kind of change with the way offenses have and evolved. You know what I'm saying? A lot more zone, a lot more pass protection, not so much downhill run game, even though I think you're seeing a lot more of that now with more, tight end sets. You see a lot of it coming back a little bit full circle. But I think in the development, especially for, like coaching school guys like we do, you know what I mean? To ask kids to go from a 3-point stance to a 2-point stance, just in general, like just that in itself, mind-blowing, right? Of how long it takes a kid to really understand the intricacies. And I think that's what separates it as you go level to level, is the individual, kind of dialing in and focusing on the individual talents of a kid, what he can do, not so much just the system-based stuff, cookie cutter coaching, I call it, right? Like across the board, we do this. No, I have a guy that can do this. Let's, and then formulate it around that.
Yeah, and what Dwight Freeney was so good at, and I loved listening to him talk to the rookie linemen, because he would say, his most famous pass rush is what? His spin. He was like the most deadly spin in all of NFL history. But he's like, every tackle I go against knows I have a good spin move. I can't just go out there and spin every time and beat them. That's not what beats them. Is he had this rule of 3 that he was going to develop a really good inside move, a really good speed to power rush, and then the moment those guys start leaning, and then he could rush around the edge. It was like when you get that guy out of a good posture, he would beat him with the spin. And so for us as linemen, what we teach, it's like we're going to fill your toolbox up with a variety of sets, because your pass set, the angle that you depart the line of scrimmage from, that's going to change. If the more vertical I take a set, the more time the defensive lineman has time and space to get around me. Sometimes I need that time based on the protection, based on my position, but I can go with sharper angles to shave time and space off of my guy and get contact on him now. Well, I grew up with a lot of two-hand punching. Well, you look at around the league, most teams are teaching independent hands. Not only just independent hands, like I always joke with coaches about, I was always taught to like hit the sides of the breastplate and grab it like a steering wheel. I'm like, well, whoever came up with that steering wheel analogy never played higher than high school, because the closer I am to the lineman's core, he has all of this ability to resist the force I'm trying to do. So for us, we teach different strikes that are closer to the armpits that manipulate the shoulder plane, or a clamp to the outside of the shoulder cap, or an underneath the breastplate. So we have different handles that we can kind of create this system based off, we call it our strike system. So it's like, if I'm going to set an A14, my angle of my set, what my outside hand is going to do, what my inside hand is going to do. And so we have a system. So when I'm studying film, I can put a rusher in a box. I can go, okay, is he a power rusher? Is he trying to beat me with his speed or his strength, bull rush? Is he a timing rusher? Is he trying to delay this? We call it the cadence for contact. So when the ball snapped, lineman and pass probably has some timer that goes kick, kick, punch, kick, 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 punch. If that guy is shaking and stuttering, to delay that, the offensive lineman generally is going to soften his posture. So I need to know, if he's trying to delay my time, then I need to be really, really in tune with my posture before contact's made. Or is he a finesse rusher? Is he trying to break down, chop, swipe, rip? Is he trying to break down what I'm doing with my hands? If I can put my rusher in one of those boxes, well, then I'm not just going, okay, here's 2 jet, I'm going to do the exact same rush. I can take the play, apply it to who I'm going against, and then because I have my toolbox full with information of how to use my body differently, I can be way more effective. So you can take a guy who maybe not be your blue chip or your first round draft pick, height and weight, speed, and you give him more information, he can be more consistent. And that's what that's what our program's done at every level of this game. And the more coaches that we kind of expose it to, or kind of, it's what I did. I said, how come no one taught me this when I was playing football? And it's
of course, that's what we all say.
Exactly. And so, like when coaches go to those clinics and they take away that one thing that's kind of their mantra for the season, and then we get to work with them and they're like, holy smokes, it's like you've reinvented football for me. It's like, we're not trying to be reinventors of the game. It's like, let's make this game better and push this, especially with our position group, offensive linemen. Let's make us as good as we can. obviously from the professional standpoint, that's going to make you more valuable to a team, bigger contracts, more money on that end. But then just overall, as it trickles down, you're developing better linemen as a coach who may be starting in college. How do you get the recruits to come to you if you don't have the NIL budget? You don't have the fancy marketing techniques. You can't offer him a ride in a Lamborghini. It's like, well,
Yeah.
I'm gonna take your skill set where it is now, and by the time you leave here, you're gonna be comparable to those kids with those at those fancy schools. And so for us, like the missing component here is information. And so it's applying that information and with the technology that we have. I mean, when I started coaching high school, and I'm like, you guys have this huddle and you can watch video
Oh
on the
yeah.
sidelines. Like it's like the NFL.
Yep.
Like the stuff you have, the resources are
Mike, it
so
is.
crazy today that all that we have to do as coaches is like learn to become better teachers, because it's easy to get stuck in the rut and go, okay, it's week 1, it's Monday, here's the Monday drills, here's the Tuesday
Great
drills.
point.
Instead of going, hey, this is where we really struggled last week. Let's make it a point of emphasis to go, hey, we're going to be better with our feet. We're going to be better at the point of attack, or we're not going to let guys around the edge. We're going to be better at widening rushers and really approach the development that way, rather than just Monday, Tuesday, and as coaches, kids have access to so many
Everything.
gurus on the internet. And
Right.
Oh yeah.
if a player comes to you with a question of, hey coach, why am I doing this, or how do I do this, or I'm struggling here, and you don't have an answer, or you're trying to BS an answer, they're going to
They
go to
see
their
through that
phone.
shit.
They're going to go to their phone and go, well, this coach says to do it this way. And we've been around a lot of NFL programs who there's some gurus out there. I'm not going to name names, but they go work with them in the offseason. They come back and they might be bigger, they might be stronger, they might have less body fat, but they are not better at their craft. And it's like they have to unlearn stuff. And
Yeah, it's a great point.
we really believe highly in what we teach, but we're always looking to evolve. And one of the grandfathers of offensive line play, Coach Jim McNally, if you follow him on Twitter,
Yep.
he's the cap lock king. And but what's so amazing is all the things that he's brought to our sport. He's always looking to find better ways, and it's like I love conversations with him, because it's like, you're doing that now, well, why? We did it this way. And it's like this constant evolving dialect, rather than going, well, I've won X Super Bowls or X championships or whatever. I've always done it this way. This is the best way to do it. And you get to a point in the season where you got to play with a backup, and you're just trying to shove this square peg in a round hole and just be like, just do it harder. And then coaches get frustrated and yell more, instead of going, I need to be able to communicate what I'm asking of my players in different ways. So player A, who hears it how I hear it, but player B is getting the same information, but I'm not getting the same result. Do I just yell at him and get frustrated and say he's an awful player? Or do I figure out where the communication breakdown is? There's some point of the sequence that I'm asking him to do that isn't clicking. My job as a coach is to be his teacher, not to be just some drill sergeant and go, well, if you can't get it done, then I'll just find somebody else. And you may not have the ability in the course of the season to find that replacement. So let's become better teachers of the game, and take some more onus on the output by being better on the input side.
I think those are some really great points. One of the big things that I think is not just a challenge for offensive line coaches, but the time constraints they get put on under by the head coach a lot of times is gonna be an issue, because they got to get the team and they got to get to this or that. But I think your point about, because of that, you have to be able to say, okay, this is what instead of just doing the drills you always did. And I think that point was really great that you brought up. What was the issues from last week? These were some of the issues we had against this team. How can we correct a couple of these things in this drill period that we have? And then the next day it might be, okay, we're going to work on these things. But constantly doing the same thing without solving problems. I think offensive line that's what those guys are. They are problem solvers, because that's what the position requires. It's not technique and problem solving, right? Like, so I got to fix this from a technical standpoint. I got to fix this from a solution standpoint. And offensive line coaches that don't do that, just, they just set you play somebody better than you or as good as you, and you're going to get beat. You know what I mean? I would say it doesn't matter when you're better than, if you're better than everybody else, you're going to have bad technique and still win. It doesn't mean that you're doing things the right way. Right. So you have to figure out how to constantly evolve that. But I think that's a really good point about constantly evolving what you're teaching, and solving the problems of each week, not just doing your drills to do drills. It's to solve the problems that the guys encountered, and asking them what they encountered too, not just what you saw on film. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Exactly. And time is our biggest enemy. We never have enough time as coaches. And sometimes we feel like the time, like you said, you get to practice and the head coach or the OC wants to put in something, what's going to get scrapped? It's going to be a team individual period,
an indie period,
a team period. Yep, indie period is always first to get scrapped. But so part of it's learning how to put more responsibility on the players. And so like when I'm working with young players and they get to the off season, and it's like, well, how do I get better? It's like, well, yeah, I got to lift weights. I can get stronger and I get bigger. Like those are the two faster, like those are the bigger, faster, stronger. Like that's the off season development plan that's been in place since the dawn of time. And so for us, it's like, you need to get better at your craft. Now, you're not necessarily, based on where you are, rules, whatever, may not be able to be in pads in the off season. But what I always tell guys is like, go back through your season and week to week. Like when you're watching film, don't just sit there and be like, and everybody's done it. It's like, oh gosh, here comes that play that I screwed up on. Coach is gonna get mad at me. And so you're not even like watching yourself like objectively, because you're like worried about how bad is coach gonna be mad at me in front of all my buddies.
You're waiting for it. You're waiting for that to come down.
Answer. Yeah. So you're not really objectively watching the film. Instead, I'm like, hey, get out a piece of notebook paper or however you take notes and start writing down your breakdowns. Was it, on this play? Start with the play. What play did I have a minus or a failing result? And look for patterns of failure. And so week to week, I can figure out, where am I struggling the most at? And sometimes it's confidence, sometimes it's technical. And sometimes in the off season, if I have all this data that I can go back to and go, man, I really struggled at pulling, or I really struggled when we ran inside zone and I had a base block, or I really struggled when I had an end who got really wide and I was turning my hips and I got beat inside a lot. And so if I can that, like, to me, that's where the most growth occurs, is when you look at those patterns of failure and you go, that's where I'm going to spend my time and getting better at that. And yeah, I gotta lift weights, I gotta run and do all that normal stuff. That's like that. Again, the standard is the standard of your program. Like doing the standard, there's a lot of players today that want the pat on the back. That's the price for being on the team. Now, how do I improve? Well, I got to do above whatever that standard is asked of me. And again, the information, it's a lot of players are like, well, how do I get better? What do you need? So when I work with a player one-on-one, I go, what did you struggle with last year? And a lot of them are like, well, as coaches, let's give these players ways to self-scout themselves. So when they get to the off season, a lot of high schools are getting close to that point where they can go, I can look back at my body of work from this season. Some programs even are able to film practice. So you have this body of work that you can look back on and go, I've struggled at XYZ, but then I don't really work on it until spring ball or next fall camp, or the lineman challenges that are nonsense, the underwear Olympics and the dumb one-on-ones that they do for all the online clout. It's like, work on your craft, so when football comes back for real, and your team is depending on you, like that's because the reality is, like, every high school kid's like, I want to play college football. Well, the reality of that is it's different. I was a 3-star kid coming out of high school, went to ASU, and they're like, you're going to redshirt. That's very rare today at those Power 5 schools. They want a kid out of high school that is at least 2 deep ready. Can we project you in the next year to be 2 deep ready? If yes, then you're going to get an offer. or you're going to go and they're going to, within that first year, they're going to make a determination. Nope, we're going to be best to find a transfer portal kid who's going to be closer to what we're looking for. We don't have to invest as much development. We just need to polish him. And so if I'm a high school kid that really wants to play at that next level, well, I need to spend a lot of time reinforcing my training habits to make sure I'm using my time appropriately, that's filling the buckets that need to be filled, right? Like height. There's not much you can do to grow your height in a given off season outside sleep and maybe looking at your nutritional profile, but your foot speed, how well you use your hands. When I go to a college practice, everybody, all the little walk through tempos, everybody goes fast. Everybody's fast feet, but their hands are slow motion, and it pisses me off. And I end up ripping the offensive line that I'm get to watch, because I'm like, your coaches expect attention to detail with your footwork, getting to your steps, getting to your landmarks. But why are you being lazy with your hands? And then you wonder why your hands are so lazy, so inconsistent on game day. And so it's the adages of, being precise.
And Mike, is the focus on the feet almost detrimental to hand speed because they're so hyper aware of their feet that they just literally forget about their hands? Or is it that the focus is just so much in that it's something that comes almost secondary to it? Is that part of it?
I think it's not emphasized to the degree that footwork is, because the footwork, when you're a coach looking at if you're an O-line coach, you can't look at 5 guys objectively at the same time. Like, our eyes don't work that way. Good coaches can maybe see 2 guys. I've yet to hear a coach like confidently say he can watch 3 guys with detail. But what they see is they see the tempo of everybody moving. And so if everybody's feet are moving at the standard, that's good. But it's hard to see if the hands are getting to the places. You're not hitting, because that's the hard part. It's you're moving fast, but you're not hitting with the hands fast. But that doesn't mean I can quickly get to my hands to the exact landmarks that I would be with the same tempo.
Right.
But to me, it's an emphasis point, not necessarily like I would never tell a kid to go, hey, we need to be slower with our feet. Like, we want that stressed,
Right.
but at the same time, just bring your hand, the detail in your hands, to the same level.
And in reality, in the actual game, the feet are going to move quickly, but they're going to engage with somebody, which is going to slow their feet down. Their hands can continue to move over the course of the block quickly, because they may have to adjust their hands. They may have to continue to move them. They may have to combat, with the person they're going against, which the feet are moving, but they get into a position and they have slighter adjustments based off of what's happening, whereas the hands might have like pretty significant adjustments based off of what's happening and staying balanced and doing that. I think also probably I this is just me guessing, but like, people, if they don't have somebody to like touch when they're doing this, they don't know what to do with their hands. Meaning, like,
like
when they're going on air.
Because I see with receivers too, like, they don't want to do,
well, that's what I was going to make that comparison.
Rep, or they get lazy with it too, because they know the feet are touching the ground, their hands are touching nothing. So they get in this kind of mode where it's like, oh, do I look weird? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's how I think that's how kids. And I'm saying guys
for sure. But if you're a coaching staff and that's your standard, if that's your standard and your expectation, after a while it doesn't become weird. It's just that's the new standard. And Absolutely. So part of it now, is if Coach, you're trying to implement that, there is a learning curve.
Yeah.
Of course. Coach, if you were to break down an offensive line itself, would you obviously have an offensive line coach itself, but would you break it down to, all right, tackles coach, guard coach, you know what I mean? Like, if in the perfect world, is that, because look, as a DB coach or a receivers coach, especially if you're, like you said, it's hard to watch 4 guys on a play. It's impossible, right? So for receiver play, sometimes we break it down. Hey, you got the inside guy, I got the outside guys. Hey, I got the left side, you got the right side. Like, how does in a perfect world, an offensive line room, how would it work coaching wise? And then, I mean, look,
Yeah,
obviously
so-
you got to throw tight ends in there, right? Because you always
Sure.
there's always those 4 guys in the corner that with their
Yep.
coach, who's usually the special coach, but he's got to do, hey, you take the tight ends because the tight ends can either go with wideouts or go with the O-line, right? Like there's a lot of logistics and moving parts. Obviously, it's based off staff and how the overall program is designed. But in your world, what's a perfect O-line room look like?
Yeah, so I mean, the higher levels, you're going to have your head guy and some sort of assistant, whether that's a grad assistant in college. Sometimes you have an analyst, or in the NFL, you have your assistant O-line coach. That assistant, more often than not, has some playing experience. But like obviously your head O-line coach, like he's got to be a guru when it comes to the system and the technique. Your assistant coach, now the head O-line coach might specialize, like, hey, like interior is like my realm.
Thing.
A lot of guys will take the tackles for the most part, and then leave the interior work to the assistant when you kind of break up in individual periods. If I could add a third one, it wouldn't necessarily be position based, it would be like technical based. So your third O-line coach would be like your technician who's creating, pre-practice, post-practice plans. Like Coach Peters, when he was an assistant in Cleveland, he ran, like, he called it his hands program after practice for the backups and like your scout team guys or your practice squad guys. And he would run them through technical drills. And those guys improved so fast. There was a year, I think it was 2020, they went to their first playoff. They won their first playoff game against the Steelers in forever. And their left guard was this practice squad, basically like a walk-on type guy, Michael Dunn, who shut down Cameron Hayward, a perennial Pro Bowler, no pressures, and everybody
Still
was
playing.
shocked exactly because they were like, well, how did this pretty much nobody off the street dominate this Pro Bowler? And it's because he spent all season long working with Coach Peters on the technical side. And that's an area that if I had a magic wand and said, how do I make O-line play better, it would be by adding a third technician coach who you could come in, and they would be able to work with the college kids in the off season. You don't want to work with you don't want, from a time standpoint, with your head coach, that's fine. But from a technician standpoint, I think that would drastically improve the position across all those higher levels. At the lower levels, realistically, probably not, but you could implement it easily at the college level, and at the NFL level, you could too as well.
Interesting. That's actually a great idea. I mean, I think having a technician, a guy that's just looking at technique, it's really a smart thing to do, because if they're worried about technique and scheme, or technique and position responsibility, something's going to go by the boards, right? Because that is a lot to be, especially with the amount of guys that are on the offensive line. So it becomes
so
an
difficult.
Issue. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, your head guy is juggling all these things. Your assistant's usually in charge of making the scout team cards. So like they're burning the candles at both end too. And so by having that third guy, at the higher levels, that's the guy that, you're having a weekly game planning, like scout meeting, where you're breaking down, hey, this is
Opponents.
the opponents, right? And so generally that gets pushed onto the player. And I've been around it long enough to realize that of who invests time there and who doesn't. And more often than not, guys aren't really watching their opponent to the level of degree that you could, especially if you had someone kind of teach them how to watch the opponents, because because at the highest
and that's
level,
a great point, Mike. I'm glad that you brought that up, right? Because even at the high school level, right, like you said, we have access to all of this stuff, right? So we have huddle. Like you said, we practice. We watch practice with our players every week, like every day after it, right? Like, or, Tuesday, Wednesday, like your work days, right? And we film it, and we get a wide shot and we get a tight shot, and the tight shot comes from a drone. So, but like the amount of the access to it, the access to the stuff that these kids have is incredible. But if they don't know how to watch film or what they're looking for, they're out there just watching it like they're watching the Giants on a Sunday or watching their favorite team. So one of the things we do in camp, especially, and with the younger guys, it's more of a hyper level of focus. I mean, look, the freshman team that we have watches practice, and they're practice film. Like, it's so important, but we kind of have this meeting in the beginning of the year and we kind of break it all down. We do it as a team and we talk about what you're looking for in film. And then each coach positionally breaks it down when they get in their own rooms and they talk about, like, this is what you need to look at. And yeah, you're looking at yourself, but when we do this season, now you start looking at everything from the opponents, look at, like, we're looking at their scheme, then we're breaking it down. Okay, who's the individual, right? Like, in even at the high school level, not a lot of guys do that. Not a lot of guys have access to that or whatever. I'm fortunate to be around a program that, makes sure that that's like a pivotal part of it. And it's important, just for our guys in general, even, and majority of my team isn't going to the next level or doesn't even want to play at the next level, but for them to see their opponents and break that down and to teach them how to watch film. And I'll go back to my play days. Like, I was fortunate enough to have coaches that really, talking VHS tapes, but they made those copies for me and said, hey, this is like what you need to look at. And then when you saw that help you on the field as a player, okay, now I'm going to watch more, right? And now I'm going to look at it, but they got to know what to look at. I think that would be a great clinic topic for all these guys that go to clinics and like, hey, here's how you teach how to watch film, and then break it down positionally, because it's one of those things that goes by the wayside. And it's like, yeah, look, I know you're watching film, but are you really watching film to the level that you really need to, and understanding what you're looking at? You know what I mean?
For sure. And the amount of high schools that I get to work with, I kind of see like the whole spectrum that exists out there in terms of the technology that's available, the buy-in from the players. Because my years coaching high school, I get frustrated. I'm like looking at huddle and be like, 30% of our team hasn't looked at the game plan I put up yet. What's going on? And I'm like, why am I more invested in your season than you? But part of it is
a starter.
But part of it's perspective, because sometimes I feel like coaches have to remind themselves, like, especially when you've been doing it so long, that these are high school kids. Like your left guard, there may have been a girl at school that smiled at him today, and he's been thinking about that 100%. Nonstop, and not the install that you spent all night working on. So part of it is having that perspective. And like, there's a lot of coaches who give out like tests before games. I don't like that. I've been around enough of those tests where guys are just cheating off of each other. That what I found to be most effective, if you're going to do some sort of pre-game back and forth, the test is the game. You're going to see how well you prepared them, how well they executed. But I really liked like two little quick stories. One is, when I was with the Colts, we had to do like, we would have to spend time breaking down our opponent, and then Friday or Saturday morning we would have a meeting. We'd go around and we basically do like a book report on our guy, and it was very brief, but it kind of it gave peace of mind to the coach. Like, I know who I'm going against. I know the ins and outs. And when I got to Carolina in camp, we would have to teach the blitz pickup to the offense. And that was very nerve-wracking, because it's like, I can look at it and go, yeah, I got this guy, but I had to know it to the level of detail that I could teach it to my quarterback and teach it to my receivers 100%. And running backs. And the coaches did that, because if you could teach something to your peers, you won't forget it yourself. So there's ways that can really maximize the understanding, because again, that perspective of, we know way more than the players do, and we can't assume that players have our knowledge. Now, I would always operate that the coaches across from me are going to know everything I know, so I can't go. So I have to be on top of my tendencies and stuff like that. But my players, I have to figure out where they are understanding. Like when I went to ASU, it took me 2 years to understand why they were labeling a guy Mike. I'm like, well, I understand the position Mike linebacker, but how come sometimes this Will is a linebacker, sometimes the nickel we're IDing as the Mike? And that was college. And so it's like, there's some base level conversations, and there's high schools that day one install in camp is like a third of the playbook, instead of going, here's our boring, this is how we line up, this is the defenses we're likely going to see this year. This is why we call this the A gap and B gap, and this is a 1 technique. This is a 3 technique. And so some of those things we have to go through at those lower levels every single year, because we have to instill that. Because at some point on there, one of my first games coaching high school, we played a team that was predominantly an over front, but lined up with 2-2s. And on the snap, they slanted to the over. But our players came off the first drive going, "Coach, they're not in the formation we worked on all week." And I said, "Okay, calm down. How did they line up?" "Well, they lined up over us, the guards." "What do we call that?" "In a 2." "Okay, great." On the snap, did they stay there or did they move? Oh, they slanted. Where did they slant? To the B gap. So to our strength. So that's an over front. They're giving you some. So players have to be able to translate and troubleshoot out on the field, not necessarily when you get to them on the sideline. So we have to give them the information and prepare them to be able to handle that. So when things don't look like they did on the whiteboard or in their playbook, they don't have a panic attack.
No, that's a big deal. I mean,
It's a huge deal.
yeah, because things change. That is the hardest thing, especially for the offensive line, because those
time.
guys actually usually coach as well. So their goal is to not to be exactly where you think they're going to be, and that makes it more difficult for the offensive line. That's how you get the advantage defensively. And so I think
And
that's
we talk all the time too, right? Like, this is high school football. You might prepare for whatever, and then all of a sudden, just a kid on the other side just does something that, like, look, he don't know what he's doing, so he's just out there to do whatever. When you're trying to teach those guys all week, hey, expect this, that's why having a general, like, rule of thumb, and hey, we can always go back to where it is, that framework, that ground stuff, that, that safety net underneath the trapeze that you install day one, so that even when shits and the bullets are flying, it's great, you still can always have that comfort level of, hey, this is what we do, irregardless of what they're doing. Right. And that works, I think, across the board, even, positionally anyway, right? Same thing works for receivers with coverage, all that kind of stuff. Like, go back to your rules, go back to your fundamentals. That's why I think it's so important to kind of, focus on those things as a coach, to give those guys and then they'll always have that confidence.
And coaches can learn from that as well, because, it's in the NFL, like, there's so much empty protection. They want to get 5 guys out. But there's sometimes, if you're going against a TJ Watt and your tackle's struggling against TJ Watt, and you're not giving him a little chip, or, we're going to stay in 6 or even 7-man pro, and we'll figure out how to accommodate that. It's like, this is our system. It doesn't matter who we go against. You just got to do your job. Now, I understand you got to do your job, but coaches, we can help put our guys in better situations. It's like, most 2-minute drills are in some sort of strong right formation. Well, that may be advantageous based on how you're sliding the center. But if you have a young guard in there that you don't want to be solo on a 3 technique all the time, don't be afraid to alter the bigger picture to help solve a bigger problem, instead of going, "Oh, well, we would have done well here, but this guy didn't get the job done. It's on him." No, it's on you, coach, because you knew that guy was good, and that matchup was not ideal, and you still chose to roll the dice time and time again, instead of going, "I can change what I do, and I know how to make the adjustments to help protect my player if I have a situation like that." And I see it too many times at those higher levels, where they're like, "All right, here's the backup left tackle against Max Crosby," or, it's like, why is the NFL team getting 6, 7 sacks in a game? At some point, we got to change our protection.
Yeah, I think that's a big deal. I think they don't. Well, I think part of it too is one of the reasons why guys get locked into these systems and forget about protection is because they undervalue what the defense can do, and they overvalue what they can do. Like, it's every coach has made that mistake, I think, but that's when you plan plays, you're planning in the perfect scenario instead of saying what can go wrong. And 90% of the time, even when you block it pretty well, it doesn't go exactly the way that you drew it up. Very rarely. I mean, anytime it ever goes the way you drew it up, it's an untouched 6 points. So how many times does that happen in a game, right? So I think that's a part of it too, and especially that coaching has changed so much, right? Even from the time you were probably playing, it's probably changed dramatically even more because of the upward mobility and financial success as you move up for coaches beyond high school, right? And even in high school, actually, it's some of the states like Texas, Georgia, South Carolina, a couple other places, but like where guys can actually make really good money. They're trying to move up as fast as possible, and they're becoming generalists. You know what I'm saying? So they're really generalists. So as a head coach, many of them cannot solve all the problems. They might be good with people. You know what I'm saying? They might be good with people. Maybe they're good at recruiting. Maybe they're good at, I don't know, offensive scheme or defensive scheme. But really what's happening now is they're much more generalists. They're probably better with people than anything else for the most part. And they're better with managing things, almost like I wouldn't even say like a CEO, because a lot of times CEOs develop.
No, they're like an assistant manager, Dave. They're like the assistant manager at McDonald's. Like they're really good at making a schedule, like or what, you know what I mean? Or they're really good. Yeah, they're really good at being like a middleman, right? Like, customers pissed that their fries weren't good. All right, go talk. Like, send Dave out there. He'll talk them off the ledge, right? Or somebody can fix the McFlurry machine, right?
They solve player and coaches problems, right? Coach here is mad at this coach. I solve that. I make it work all right. I solve players mad at X. Players mad at X coach. I solve that. I keep the ship afloat. That's a great point, Derek. And I think
because I've been that guy.
Because that's their aspiration. They're so much in the land of generalists as far as football knowledge. And that's why I think that you've seen so many guys, too, that have come into the game that have not played, literally have not played. Like, I get, like, everyone wants to be Mike Leach, okay? Everyone thinks they're Mike Leach. Everyone thinks they're Mike Leach. Like, or Hatcher, or, some of these guys that really didn't play that much. But
Jed Fish.
Yeah, but have managed to work their way up to top and have success. So many guys are getting into the mix that are like these guys. And what happens is they're all generalists, and they can solve some people problems, which is an important skill, obviously. But when the game's going awry, they can't solve problems at the line level if the line coach is struggling. They can't come over. There's nowhere for that offensive line coach to consult with the head coach. Like, you tell me that Nick Saban does not know, even though he's a defensive back guy, that's his skill set, right? You can't tell me that he doesn't know how to solve problems in almost every facet, even if he's not an expert, in every facet, right, from his experience. And I think that's one of the things that's changing in coaches, because guys are moving up so fast. They're such generalists. They haven't had time to, like, hone a craft on the offensive line, or hone a craft as a wide receiver or a defensive line coach. And they haven't honed a craft, so they don't develop that skill set of problem solving at a positional level. Whereas a coach who's done that, even if he's an expert in a certain area, he knows what it's like to solve problems. So when a line coach is looking for answers, or a defensive line coach is looking for answers, he could say, "Hey, have you thought about this? Where's his hand placement?" He doesn't have to be an expert in hand placement. That's the offensive line coaches or the guys but he has to say, "Hey, is he getting these guys don't even know that." There's a lot of guys that don't even know that might be an issue. They may, they may not know how to even solve an issue. And guys go throughout a game. I see this on the sidelines with players, like they don't, and the position coaches, they're looking for some help. They're looking for a lifeline in the middle of a game that's going bad, and it just goes downhill fast. Like, that's how you see some of these crazy games where, you know, you think it should work a certain way and it goes downhill fast. And I think that that's a big part. Like, the guys like why do I like the Indiana coach? I think the Indiana coach, and I don't know him per se, what his expertise is, but it seems to me that that guy does a lot of making sure that along the way, all these things are getting solved throughout the course of the game. So if something is getting derailed, that they could kind of stop it. And that's an issue that happens. And guys that are experienced head coaches who've come up through the ranks and really put in some time, I think have a better ability to do that. I think that's really crazy hard for a guy who didn't even play to be able to come up through the ranks. Like, if you read Mike Leach's book, okay, yeah, Mike Leach didn't play football, but he did come up through the ranks in a long process of learning.
Sleeping in his car for, you know, whatever, and it comes.
Yeah.
To I also, and look, Dave, I like
was
everything that you're saying
repeatedly to learn. I mean, that was one of the things I learned in his book. He spent the whole off season in his car on the road, right? Really trying to learn. And guys just kind of fast forward that part of that chapter right there and just say, hey, this guy is a creative guru offensively without understanding the context. He didn't play football. I didn't play football. I'm Mike Leach. You know, I could draw X's and O's. You know, I mean, I think if you give anybody enough time,
I think Dave
could be pretty creative with X's and O's. You know, like if we all like, hey, what's the craziest, wildest things we could do? Okay, I think we could all kind of figure it out. How do you get that to work becomes a much more difficult thing, and technique is the front part of all of that. That's the front part of everything. And if you can't solve that, you start to have a problem. You know. Anyway,
I think you see it a lot with young coaches. Like, right, Mike? Like, just, I think you see it now, like with young guys getting into it, right? Like, they want to climb the ranks so fast that they're not willing to draw the cards, right? They're not willing to sit in a room, keep their mouths shut for the first 2 years and just sponge it all in, right? And learn to be able to then, right? Like, because everybody wants to run their own room. Everybody's chasing.
That's the other thing.
They're chasing titles. And look, how many guys have we had on this, Dave, that talk about coaches being coached, right? Like, how do you coach the coaches? You can't just expect, and it's one of the things I learned when I got into the profession after playing is, as a player, you think you know all of it, and you have no idea, because coaching is teaching. There's so many things that go into the coaching world itself that just because you played does not make you a really good coach. You might know how to play. You might be physically gifted and all those, but now how do you take something and teach it to someone who doesn't have those physical talents, who's not that gifted? Because now, and like you said, Mike, I thought it was great that, you know, hey, it wasn't a test, but I had to go teach it to the others, right? Because I do it with my receivers. Like, hey, man, like, can you go teach like the DBs about, like, when they're in this coverage, you do this, or why you do that, right? To add that other level, that next level of understanding. I think a lot of young coaches are just trying to climb the ranks so fast, right? Chasing whether it's titles or paychecks or whatever it is, that going through all of those steps to kind of get where it is. We see it all the time with our club 7-on-7. Like, these guys are out there and it's like, you know, they're the guys with the backpacks, right? They're the guy that are like holding up the cards for the plays. It's like, well, you're running this, but why are you running that? Like, they can't answer it. They just run the play because it worked on Madden. I think that's a level of, you know, as you get to those higher levels, you have to be attention to detail oriented, and having gone through those steps helps you, because that's what this 90% of this game is, troubleshooting. It's not what you game plan for. It's they're doing this. How do I counter that? It's a chess match, you know, and it's like, no, dude, like, you got to know the ins and the outs of what's going on, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's a big part.
It's such a unique profession. The longevity is very, very limited. And at the highest level, there's I mean, case story after case study going. Here was a great coordinator who, once he became a head coach, couldn't be a head coach.
You can name 5 of them right off the top of your head, Mike.
100%, because a head coach in the NFL is very different than a head coach at a university. A head coach in the NFL, like you're the PR face of this
Yeah.
multi-million-dollar company. Now, for a university, you're one spoke of this wheel, and depending at the school, it's a pretty big spoke. But
Who
again,
did you play for,
you're
Mike, at ASU? Who was your head coach at ASU?
I played 4 years for Dirk Cutter, who played coaching the NFL, and then Dirk
Yep.
played for Dennis Erickson my senior year. So he was
That's
Miami's, yeah. So very
buddy.
very different, and like just I mean, Cutter was he's a guy whose offensive mind was unlike very few people I've ever come across. Just amazing, but didn't like to deal with the PR media stuff. That he just wanted to be real.
Just wanted
and
to
didn't want
coach
to put,
ball.
didn't want to put on this face that a lot of college coaches are asked to do, and this dog and pony show that just it has to get. I would never want to do it. And then got to coach in the NFL and was like, all of that was gone. It was just performance. And then he got some head time, and it was back into that realm. And so, but I understand the draw to be a head coach. You look at you go be a head coach in college and you get these giant contracts and they fire you. It's like, all right, I'll go take vacation for a couple of years and you got to pay me all this money. In the NFL,
in the world is a fired college, a fired coach.
Once you've been a head coach, like how many times do we see guys move it into the media, or you can basically be in that coaching circuit for the rest of your life. But those guys who grind with no, like we've got a young coach here at Arizona State, Kenny Dillingham, who got hurt in high school and
awesome.
Basically was begging to take coffee orders and do the grunt work and grind and learn.
His name's probably on every list right now for these open jobs.
It is. And, you look at the things he does and, from an X's and O standpoint, technical standpoint, he can bring in that. But part of it is engaging the players and understanding there's this balancing act that at the NFL level where, like, I remember when the Rams won the Super Bowl, their left tackle, Andrew Whitworth, I played with in Cincinnati. Amazing guy. Yeah, but he was older than his head coach when they won the Super Bowl, and you get to the NFL and a lot of those players are making more money than you or the coaching staff. And so there's a weird dynamic. It's like, how do you get these multimillionaires? And really, obviously, quarterback separates the NFL teams. But coaching does. I would say coaching is number 2 because every team has got amazing talent, some better than others, but for the most part, like you can be very successful if you get those players to be on the same mission, playing for each other or playing for that collective goal. At the college ranks, it's a juggling act. You're juggling recruiting, you're juggling keeping your own players from leaving, you're juggling the X's and O's of the season. So it becomes a managerial role to an extent, and it's learning who you have to bring in. There's a lot of coaches in history that were just yes men. They bring in their guys that just took orders and didn't want to push back. There's some coaches that want to be questioned and they want that friction that will eventually, that pressure that breeds diamond seasons. They want that.
Right.
It's not a one size fits all. It's like
it's not
like
cookie
when you
cutter.
it's like you're the best college football player, then you got to go play on the crappiest team in the NFL the next season.
Right.
It's
really hard.
You take a head job. Expectations are higher than they've ever been. The time that they give you to be good is lower than it's ever been. And so it's a profession that it looks good, it sounds good, but it's not fit for everyone. And I really wish certain coaches would go, I'm really, and Bill Callahan has said it. He was probably one of the best O-line coaches in the league. He's had his time as an interim head coach. He goes, I don't want that. I just want to be a really good position coach. He could have been a coordinator. I don't want that. I just want to be good at what I do. And sometimes people get a little big-eyed with that little shiny object or that title or that Brinks truck that's about to be backed up to their house and dump off boatloads of money. And so, I mean, it's hard because if you get offered generational changing money, how do you say no to that to your family? There's some coaches who go, I'm just going to stay in my lane and I'm going to make this position group or this program, this offense as good as I can. And it's sad. I understand it, but there's part of me that wishes more coaches could stand on principle and being like, I don't want to deal with the nonsense that head guy has to deal with. That's why he gets paid so much money, is because he has to deal with all the pressure and all the dumb questions. And I just want to coach football.
Mike, I say it all the time. Mike, I would never want to be a head coach, especially high school level, like with, nowadays with the access that parents have to you, with the, the political stuff that goes on from the top down, irregardless of where you are. I think that stuff happens. On what level, I don't, you know what I mean? Every program's different. Every state to state, it's different. But I think generally you could say, like, I mean, look at just like a fan of an NFL team, right? Like they're called for guys' heads, like, after, you win a Super Bowl and then the next year they're like ready to fire you because you lost a game, right? Like, and we all know like what actually goes into winning any contest, right? Like any game at any level is really hard to do. It's not the norm, but that's the expectation level. And these are from people that are just general fans, right? It's investment in that stuff for a fan, for anybody, for a parent, right? Like there's a lot of pressure, from so many different angles. You're taking bullets from all over. Like, buddy, you can keep the extra key. You can keep, you know what I mean? Like you can keep I want no part of that. Let me just coach ball. And look, if there's an issue, like, that's the head coach, man. Sorry. Like, this is what it is. This is how we do it. And that's who you talk to. So I would never want to do it. I just think it's wild. I get why guys do, but look, if I were to ever, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm going to be prepared in every way, shape, or form. And for me, going through that process of growing and developing and constantly tweaking and never staying the same, because this game doesn't stay the same from year to year. So you have to kind of go with it. If I wasn't, filling my own toolbox for that, then I'm not signing up for it. Whereas I think some guys just sign up for it and they got nothing in that toolbox other than, how they were coached or where they played is all they know. And they think that's okay, I'm good to go. And then when you get into it, you learn real quick, as a head coach, you're doing a lot more than, the least thing you're doing is coaching ball. That's the least percent of your time where it goes. And I think that's really difficult. But that title, especially now that we've seen the game evolve and how, like you said, generational money, it's starting to trickle down now. It's why you see the transfer portal and college kids with NIL. Like, how do I tell an 18-year-old not the school where he's going to get developed right into whatever, because he can go get life-changing money now and he's a blown Achilles away from never being able to play again or whatever that is. Like, it's really difficult to kind of juggle that, with coaches, with players, with everybody. It's just a really weird world that we've come into now, and everything's in the limelight with social media. Like, everybody sees everything and what's trending and all, so it's, and that's how these kids grew up, like with that phone in their hand, with the instant access to, you tell a kid, like, trust the process, man. Like, that offer is going to come. They don't know that. They ain't thinking that way. Like, they need it now. It's a difficult world to be in. I'll tell you that much. And Dave's been a head coach, and turned programs around and done all this and done that. Like, he'll be the first one to tell you, like, it's not easy. And it is sure as hell not someone, that takes things to a personal level, because you're going to take bullets. Like, that's the bare minimum of it. Yeah.
And there are some people who are built for that role, and there are some people who just shine. I mean, I know when I got to play for Tony Dungy in Indianapolis, it's just, you're like, that guy. You would follow him anywhere. And again, the dynamics are so different. Like a Bill Belichick. There's guys who you tell stories of. It wasn't all fun and games in it, but we accomplished the mission. And there's some coaches who are like, look, we're going to enjoy this process. Again, going back to Dillingham here at Arizona State, he was quoted, like, we're going to work harder than anybody, and we're going to have the most fun doing it. And so like you see the things that they do, it's like he wants to imprint that this is still a game and it's fun. And you know, at the there's a various levels of this game where that gets lost. And you know, and that's where that perspective comes in, going, you know what, like we're going to battle on Friday or Saturday or Sunday, but it's the journey that is why we do it, right? Because you win a good game, or you win a game. I was listening to McVay had a quote the other day. It's like you win the Super Bowl and you think you'd be happy, but all you did is just move the finish line a little bit further back. And I was like, man, like how true is that? It's like whether it's the week mission and all of the stress and work and sweat and tears, blood goes into it, and you win, and there's that moment of yes, we won, but it doesn't last long, because it's like, all right, we have another opponent. Well, I want to feel that same way again next week, or it doesn't go bad, I lose. Well, I can't erase that feeling until next week. But just understanding that head roll, I mean, you're spinning plates like a lady at a circus. Like you've got so many things that you've got to be focused on at the end of the day. Like you're like I feel like the people who have success at that role are the ones that are most genuine to who they are. If you try to be Bill Belichick and you're not him, it's not going to last. If you try to be Andy Reid or you try to be McVay, like you're not going to be them if that's not who you are. And so I think the guys who have success are the ones who are true to who they are, and they know, like, what I did or my previous Super Bowl or my previous record, that's not going to matter this season. It's like I have to prove it, just like I'm asking of my players. I have to come with the preparation. I have to come with the plan, and I have to make sure my players can execute that plan week in and week out.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. It's a difficult process. I learned a ton today, especially with the offensive line stuff. And can you give, before we let you go, best way for people to find you if they want to have a conversation with you and all that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah. Our website is tipofthespearfootball.com or TOSFB.com. We have in-person resources. We have digital video libraries. We offer a 30-day free trial to our video library. So we've got 200 plus videos that go through, you know, clinics we've done, methodologies for contact, drills, in season, out of season. And then if anybody wants to reach out to me personally, you can reach me at mike@tosfb.com, shoot me an email, and happy to help. And, you know, football's given me a lot, and it's given you guys a lot. And I just like to return and kind of help the next generation, so this doesn't turn into flag football in 20 years.
Coach Mike, Coach Frank Joffrey says hi. He gave you a hell of a, you know, he was excited when I told him that I was having you on. He got all jacked up and got excited. So he's been on a couple times.
Talk about a great O-line coach. Frank's the man. I love that guy.
Stud.
That's a great guy. Great guy. We had him on a while ago, right?
He's been on a couple of times. He's been on. He's always looking to talk O-line play. Dude. I get a text from him probably once a week about some craziness that, you know, because he's in the high school world now, right? Like, so he left the college world. He's now in the high school world out in Indiana, you know, out in Indianapolis, and he's doing his thing. And he's like, "Is this really what kids are like now?" It's like, yeah, dude. This is what high school. Now, buddy. I'm like, now you see if you can really coach, big guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, exactly. But he loves it. He's a great guy. He said nothing but good things to say. Mike, I can't appreciate, you know, I thank you enough. Obviously, it's great. I love always talking O-line play. Obviously, I look like one, but never was one. But it's great to kind of talk some O-line play. It's a position that doesn't get enough credit. So appreciate you coming on and taking the time, buddy.
Hey, thanks, guys. Best of luck.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
All right. Fantastic stuff on the O-line today. Wow,
dude,
really
some
cool.
Technical shit, buddy. Like, wow, like, and it's always so easy, like, because you see, like, at the highest level, right? Like, you guys think like O-line plays, like, hey, I get in a stance and I push or I pull or I do this, right? And like, here we are sitting here talking about like hand placement, like where do you punch, like, and then angles like of your body just coming off the, you know what I mean, like the attention to detail that has to go into, you know, being the highest level when it comes to that stuff. Like, people just really don't understand. Like, yeah, these guys study who they're going against. You know what I mean? For hours a week to just reset and do it again the next week, and kind of, and that's on top of like getting their body ready and eating right and doing all this other stuff. Like, the technical side of this game, like, I think it, like, when we have guys like him on that talk technical about position play and those types of things, it just blows my mind, always does, because it's just that level. It's just unbelievable goes into being, at the high, and what it takes, to just, be there, right? And then be really good at it. Like, that's a whole different level of conversation,
No doubt about it. Great stuff. We'll be back tomorrow, 10 a.m. with
Coach Baldy, or Coach Juice, as they call him. So we had the head coach from St. Peter's Catholic on a couple of weeks ago, Jesse Chinchero. And so this is his strength guy who he talked about, and basically kind of gave credit as to why they've become the powerhouse that they are. So we'll get to talk to him a little bit kind of about how he runs things in his weight room down at St. Peter's Catholic.
No,
St. Petersburg Catholic. Sorry, my fault.
Right.
Right. Who's literally gone from like 0 to like undefeated right now, and they're crushing people. So obviously there's something that off the field stuff that matters.
Oh, definitely. There's no doubt about it. I'm still waiting on my what was it called? Come in. What's the program we just had on that had the
OVR?
OVR. Waiting on my OVR. Still waiting. It should be here soon, hopefully. Waiting for my OVR.
Well, I don't know. Does the government shutdown have anything to do with that?
I doubt it. No, I doubt it. But I'm heavy in hoop season, baby. Boom. Heavy in hoops.
I know you are, dude.
We already had a game.
Really? Already had one?
Our
this is the school team, right? School team?
Well, he's on the school team, the St. Leo's, but he also was on Mid-South travel. So, but we had Mid-South.
They have a travel team within the school itself, or within the town itself.
Yeah. So we have Mid-South and Mid-North, and then we're on this.
Dude, Mid-North's still playing, buddy. Mid-North is still playing.
Oh, you mean the high school? Yeah, they have a great year.
Unbelievable. Upset Manalapan. Like, dude, they got an opportunity to win a sectional this weekend.
Yes, Brick Memorial.
Good luck with that hammer, buddy. Woo, baby.
And then I think they would go. Then there's one more round, right? Is that it, or two more rounds?
So, because it goes sectional, regional, and then group.
Lord have mercy.
Like, this is where it used to end for like this. You win this week, like, you're done. You're a state champ. It's over. Now, North 1 plays North 2. Central plays South. So then you're a regional champ. And then if you want the big one where you're the overall group champ, like, one more.
14 games. You can
14 games, brother. And look, weather's changed now, so you're bundled up at practice these days, buddy. But look, I don't even know what that's like. I could imagine that friggin' A. I miss being cold at practice. What the hell? I think I forgot how to win, but it is what it is.
Yeah, no doubt.
You're already in hoops. Like, you ended only 2 weeks ago, and you're already freaking a game deep for hoops. Damn.
Yeah, because the guys, River Plaza has their championship to go to Florida. I think is this week. I think.
Right, and I think St. James just won another thing, so they're going somewhere. Whatever. Yeah.
I think 12U is playing for some
couple of our guys on those teams, buddy.
Oh yeah, I looked at 14U. I'm like, half these guys are these guys.
You're like, wow. You're like
12U.
You're like, okay.
I'm like, oh, because you get tagged on the picture, so that's how I know.
Oh, every time, dude. Like, hey, let me just tag everybody.
I'm like,
should I get tagged in? I'm like, who is this guy? And then it's like, oh, okay. There you go. There's the link.
Absolutely.
Hey, good for them, buddy. You know what I mean? Good for you. I mean, I'm sure they're juggling it too, right? Because they got football practice. What do you do with basketball? You know what I mean? Like, that was always the fact. I can always remember that, like in high school playing for a state championship, like you missed the first basketball scrimmage. You weren't at practice. Like, hey, you can go sit on the side here, but you know, and our basketball coach knew that, like shit, you know. And even if it wasn't, we played Thanksgiving Day, so he knew that next day because you used to be able to, you know, you used to start basketball practice that Friday, you know, like
Right.
Thanksgiving Day game was Thursday. Friday, you were up at 7 a.m. in the gym, shit, buddy. That there ain't nothing like that soreness after a Thanksgiving Day game, and then you try to do a layup. Like I ain't picked up a ball since freaking September. Like, wait, shoot a free throw? Like, oh, you're in shape. You played football. Bullshit, dude. Basketball shape. Way did not even close, dude. All right, different, 17. Totally get on the lines. There we go. Yeah, right.
That's a different shape. There's no doubt about it. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. I'm gonna give you a call. I got a quick couple of things, and then we'll go from there. But that was really, really good. I like
yeah, Mike was good.
Yeah, O-line is doesn't get enough love, and
love that he talked about like not being able to watch 5 guys at once. That's really hard, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like even coaching DBs, like, hey, you're watching all 4. Like, how? You tell me how.
You know how I used to try to do it because I knew you could see it. I would be like, okay, where, like, if I, obviously in game, like, where did the guy come from that made the play? That's how I would try to figure it out if I didn't see it. Like, where did he come from?
Right.
Oh, he came from A gap. Okay, wait, all right. So this guy's supposed to be stepping A gap. So like, but it's at the higher levels, it's even way harder. So, all right, till next time.
All right.